Thank you very much. Good timing. So with that, committee members, good morning. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. With that, if I could please have the secretary call the roll.
Senator Canizaro. Senator Dondero-Loop. Senator Keykeper. Senator Ratty. Senator Severs-Gansert. Assemblywoman Benitez-Thompson.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt. Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Chair Carlton.
And I am here. Good morning to everyone. We have some subcommittee closings to go through today. Staff is passing them out to you as we speak. Give you a moment and then we will proceed. I believe we are ready to begin. So with that, Mr. Drost, nice to see you. If you'd like to go ahead and proceed. Oh, Jay Marie's going for, oh, I'm sorry. Going first? Go ahead. Apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. For the record, J. Marie Mangoba for the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. And before we begin presenting budgets for closing, fiscal staff wanted to clarify the read by grade 3 and class size reduction program funding, which were discussed during the budget hearing of the new COVID-19 funding budget on April 13, 2021. The governor recommends net funding of $29.5 million over the 2021-23 biennium for the Read by Grade 3 program, which represents a reduction of $33.4 million when compared to the $62.9 million approved by the 2019 legislature. Additionally, the governor recommends net funding of $158.5 million for the class size reduction program, which represents a reduction of $155.9 million over the 2021 biennium. Fiscal staff would note that net funding for both these programs are recommended by the governor to be transferred to the new state education funding account to support the pupil-centered funding plan. And thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity to clarify. For to Mr. Drost to begin the budget closings for the Department of Education.
Thank you very much. So with that, Mr. Drost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, and members of the subcommittee. For the record, Adam Drost with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Today, the subcommittee will be closing 14 Nevada Department of Education, or NDE, budgets. The first being the NDE COVID-19 funding budget, which was heard by the subcommittee last week, actually, April 13th. This budget was not included in the executive budget, and the governor's finance office has submitted 3 budget amendments recommending the creation of this new executive budget for the Nevada Department of Education. This budget would contain federal funding provided for K-12 education in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There's one major issue for this budget closing, and that's the establishment of the new budget. The 3 budget amendments that I previously mentioned recommend total federal funding of approximately $1.3 billion over the 21-23 biennium. For background, there were 3 pieces of federal legislation that provided funding for K-12 education in response to the COVID-19 pandemic that I'll cover. The first was the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act, in March 2020. And that provided elementary and secondary school emergency relief, or ESSER funding, as I'll refer to it. So that was the first batch of ESSER funding. The CARES Act also provided governor's emergency education relief, or GEAR funding, in that act as well. The second piece of legislation was passed in December 2020, and that was the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or the CRISA Act. That provided ESSER 2 funding, as well as Gear 2 funding. Finally, last month, the American Rescue Plan Act was passed, and that provided elementary, again, a 3rd round of ESSER funding on that ARP Act. As I previously mentioned, this budget is currently in the state accounting system. However, it's a non-executive budget since it was not included in the executive budget last session or approved by the 2019 legislature. If this budget is approved by the 21 legislature, funding for this new budget would be included in the 2021 Authorizations Act, which would, within the limitations of NRS 353-220 and 353-335, subject certain changes within this budget to review and approval by the IFC. The department indicates that providing this expenditure authority in this budget, as opposed to the current practice of reflecting these expenditures in various NDE budgets, would improve transparency and accountability, while also allowing reports and financial analysis to be prepared in a more efficient manner. So the first budget amendment is Budget Amendment A2158522710, and that recommended ESSER 2 funding of $25.8 million in FY 2020 and $21.9 million in FY 23, as well as Gear 2 funding of $11.4 million in FY 22 and $818,511 in FY 23. Again, this funding was provided by the Federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, and the IFC approved acceptance of this grant in February 2021. However, at that time, the budget was non-executive, so it was not approved through the standard work program process. The Gear 2 funding may be used to provide support through a subgrant or contract to local education agency, or LEAs, which are school districts and the state public charter school authority, as well as institutions of higher education and education-related entities that the governor deems essential for carrying out emergency educational services, providing childcare and early childhood education, providing social and emotional support, and protecting education-related jobs. On page 5 of your packet, it lays out the budget amendment and the planned expenditures related to the Gear 2 funding. This includes infinite campus enhancements, the final funding that was approved for those enhancements during the IFC this month, utilizing the final amount of funding using this Gear 2 funding. In addition, it would provide Nevada-ready pre-K seats of approximately 376.5 seats funded at $8,410 per seat. It would also expand access to college-level coursework by providing some dual enrollment funding. It would also provide funding for the uniform financial management system that for the new financial system for the department. That funding was previously approved by SB 543 of the 2019 session. However, it was ultimately, through budget reductions, withdrawn. And the estimated cost is $6 million, which the department plans on funding using both ESSER funding as well as Gear funding. There's also $3.8 million for school-based mental health professionals. The department plans on funding about 100 additional school mental health professionals for a total cost of $7.5 million in total, which they would fund 50% with ESSER funding as well as 50% with Gear funding. The other item I would bring to your attention is the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools program, and the department plans on having a contract project manager to help with that, administering that program. On the bottom of page 5 of your packet, I would note a technical adjustment that has been requested by the department. The department indicates the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools, they would request that a contract position equivalent to an education programs professional position be added to the budget. They indicate that since non-public schools are not public agencies, the department must reimburse them for eligible expenses, contract to provide the services requested, or subgrant to school districts that would provide services to the non-public schools. They indicate this would be a bit of extra work for the department, and that additional contract position would help with that service. So they plan on using some of the administrative costs that allowable by that program to fund that additional contract position. Moving on to ESSER 2 funding, on page 6 of your packet is lays out the administrative expenses related to ESSER 2 funding. You will know at the top of that table, there's 6 contract positions that would assist with the management and oversight of the grant. There's also some infinite campus enhancements, some NDE website improvements, as well as some modifications to the department's grant reporting system. Moving on to the ESSER non-administrative, or the 10% reserve funding that can be used by the department Page 7 of your packet provides the planned expenditures with that funding. This includes incentivizing pathways to teaching, which provides stipends as well as tuition assistance for individuals moving through the teacher preparation program. The other piece of that uniform financial management system for the department that I mentioned earlier that would be funded with GEAR funding as well as ESSER funding. The other piece of the school-based mental health professionals that would be funded with GEAR and ESSER funding. There's also funding to sustain Safe Voice for the ongoing cost of the Safe Voice platform, as well as some DPS personnel that support the Safe Voice program. There's also various educational platforms and systems, which includes Canvas Learning Management System, MyOn Digital Library, as well as Discovery Education Experience. I would also note there's some support for student literacy with funding available for the Measures of Academic Progress, or the MAP assessment, that is currently used for the literacy program. There's a high school graduation incentives, as well as one contract position to assist with that program, as well as translation services that the NDE would use to prioritize and translation of its public-facing documents. I would note at the bottom of the table the planned FY 2024 expenditures. This grant is allowable into FY 2024, and the department has planned expenditures that are reflected above that they plan to continue into FY 2024, and those costs are reflected in the FY 2023 column. Moving to page 8 of your packet, during the department's budget hearing last week, the subcommittee expressed interest in various planned initiatives that I'll summarize. This includes the incentivizing pathways to teaching, with the department indicating that many individuals fail to enter the teaching profession due to the student teaching requirement. And this would assist students with completing their teaching programs by providing a stipend while they student teach, and also assist with the state's teacher pipeline. The department indicated that educator preparation programs would apply for funds based on the number of pre-service teachers expected to participate in student teaching, and each program would be responsible for distribution of funding to the recipients. The Strategic School Improvement Planning Platform, the department indicates that it currently works with districts and schools on school improvement plans and district and performance plans. And once in place, this enhancement would allow that information to be collected in a digital format, which would allow the data to be easily updated and modified and used across the department for various projects. The high school graduation incentives would support fifth-year seniors in meeting the graduation requirements for a high school diploma and concluding their K-12 education. The recommended budget for this initiative estimates $1,000 incentives for approximately 4,000 students, but the NDE indicates that actual expenditures may vary based on the number of students who wish to take advantage and participate in the program. During the budget hearing, the department indicated it continues to work with school districts to identify the best method for providing the incentive funding to those students. Finally, the school-based mental health professionals, the NDE indicated these positions would assist schools and students as the pandemic recovery continues. The department indicated it would review ratios, need, and availability of licensed individuals when distributing this funding for those positions among the school districts and charter schools. The department indicates that all funding is budgeted in FY 2020 as pupils return to school. However, if funds are not expended, it would be balanced forward and used in FY 2023. On page 9 of your packet, there are a few technical adjustments that have been requested by the department as well as the governor's finance office that I'll highlight. This includes the support for student literacy assessment system. As I previously mentioned, the Measures of Academic Progress, or MAP assessments, are used for the literacy program, and the department would request a technical adjustment to reflect those expenditures in the planned year of use, which would be funding of $820,855 in FY22 and $876,535 in FY23. For sustaining Safe Voice, the department indicates the funding of $140,000 for the Department of Public Safety staff that support the Safe Voice program was included in FY22, but should be reflected in 23. So a technical adjustment is requested there. In addition, planned FY 2024 administrative expenditures of $125,765 are included in FY 2022. However, those planned expenditures should be reflected in 23, consistent with the budgeting of other planned FY 2024 expenditures. A contract school nurse coordinator position was approved by the IFC in April 2021 to assist with student mental health services, utilizing federal ESSER II funding. And the NDE indicates that position was inadvertently excluded from the budget amendment. So the department requests a technical adjustment to reflect the budgeted cost of that position of $98,853 in FY22 and $123,566 in FY23 for that position. There's also one contract position equivalent to an education programs professional position that would support the high school graduation incentives program. However, that position's cost was not budgeted for a full year in the budget amendment, and the NDE requests technical adjustments to correct that salary cost for a full year. The department also indicates it would be beneficial to reflect the ESER 2 administrative and non-administrative costs between separate expenditure categories. So staff request an adjustment to reflect those costs in separate expenditure categories in this budget. Finally, the department indicates that these various changes will require a rebalancing of budgeted expenditures. And to do so, the department requests that translation services expenditures for ESER 2 be amended as necessary, with any changes funded balanced to the American Rescue Plan Act's ESSER funding. The department indicates this would require funding to be of approximately $181,230 to be transferred to the ARP ESSER funding. However, that amount may be revised based on all approved technical adjustments. And these requested technical adjustments appear reasonable to fiscal staff. Moving to page 10 of your document, this is the next budget amendment A21586.
Mr. Drost, if I could stop you for just a moment. Thank you.
Sure.
So because we have all of these that are independent budget amendments, but yet I'm getting some feedback, but because they all fit together, committee members, if you have any questions on this particular budget amendment, at this time, we can address those. We'll go to the next ones. But at the very end, it's what I'm calling a monster motion. But we can still have other discussions about it. But if we want to break it down to make it a little easier, if you have any particular questions on this budget amendment, but nothing will prohibit you from, going back to it later on. But if there's anything right now that you'd like Mr. Drost to go over before we move on, Senator Kickover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Drost, and it was in the in relation to the additional information provided as a supplement. It's on page 8 of our packet, particularly as it relates to high school graduation incentives. Are those incentives for schools or incentives for students?
It is my understanding for the students, we could have the department confirm.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, those are for students.
So the proposal is to provide a financial payment to students to graduate?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, that is what is proposed at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chairwoman, down here we weren't able to hear.
I had a hard time also. So, Ms. Ebert, if you could repeat the answer, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, State Superintendent Joan Ebert. Yes, what is proposed before you is directly for the students.
And if I could ask you to expand a little bit on the thought process behind, so these are fifth-year seniors, if I'm understanding it correctly. So how do we propose to pay students?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, we worked with school districts and actually tonight also with guidance counselors. We know we have a huge problem right now in our educational environment, twofold. One, caused because of the pandemic and students not having access directly to in-person learning. The other piece is we know that many students have been supporting their families during this crisis. They have jobs that they have been working, and so those pieces together were developed to put this proposal before you. Those two pieces in consideration for fifth-year seniors is what was developed.
Other questions? Just a moment, Mr. Roberts, Ms. Howdigy, and then I'll go to Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was looking through my notes, and I don't know if I just missed it, and I'm not, this was asked during the hearings, but I was looking at the gear and ESSER dollars, and they all have contract positions in there. And so are these positions going to be eliminated once the federal funding runs out? Or is there an intention to come back and ask for general fund dollars to keep these positions going?
Ms. Ebert?
Thank you. Superintendent Ebert, for the record, yes, those positions are contracted positions, not expected to be added once those funds are expended.
Right, thank you. Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In more on the previous question, you talked about the incentive program for students in the proposal today, but could you give a little more detail on what the proposal is, like what this money would go to each student and how it would incentivize them? I understand the need. I'm just trying to figure out how many students are going to actually benefit from it based on the dollar amount that we're allocating.
Thank you for the question, Joan Ebert, for the record. We are in the process in the proposal before you as well. We also have a request for an educational support professional. So with the many moving parts, we have had initial discussions with school districts and superintendents. This evening, we're actually working with guidance counselors from across the state. We are also pulling in students and understanding the timing of summer coming upon us really quickly. We're moving down both paths. So specifics as far as the methodology for allocation of those funds, we are still working out.
Thank you for the answer, and we look forward to hearing the specifics when you get to them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Mr. Roberts. Along the same line. So with that, I believe we can, if there are no other questions on this one, did you have oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much. So mine is just about process, because I want to make sure that I've got this right. So with the motion that we would potentially be considering, anything that is listed out in the different budget amendments would be approved and play out, and then what isn't talked about in specific planning, those would be the programs approved by IFC. Do I have that understanding right? I was just trying to figure out as this conversation moves forward, where the different types of conversations that we would be having. So am I understanding that right?
So it's my intention as the committee moves forward through all these different budget items, because we're actually setting up new budget accounts, that as we get towards the end, to have that conversation about which of these we feel we can move forward with, and which of these we feel that we would like to possibly set off to the side in reserves, depending upon what the actual criteria for designating them and getting them out on the street. So there is an opportunity for a discussion when we get to the very end of this about those that we may want to set off to the side, get more information on, and then have them come back and explain the program and how it's going to work before we actually move forward with it, so that we can get all those questions answered. So that would be the chair's intent as we get towards like I said, the large motion that's at the end, to have staff walk us through exactly how we would like to address some of those that we may not have quite enough information on, because they're still being developed, and we're in a time frame where things are still moving. We understand that, and as we heard, there's going to be a meeting this evening to have more conversation, but we also know we do need to keep some of this moving forward at this time. So there will be options for us to be able to look at some of these and say, we need a little more information, or we'd like to be able to digest this a little bit longer before we move forward.
And I appreciate that clarification, Madam Chairwoman. I was looking back to my notes from our April 13th meeting, and to the point of one of the program that we just talked about with the incentives for, graduates. At that time, all we had was incentive of one contract position. And I think that what I interpreted that as on April 13th was perhaps an incentive to get the contract position, and then I see it playing out here in a really different way. And I know that as the programs are being built and there are conversations with stakeholders, they'll continue to evolve. So I just wanted to make sure that the role we play in the evolution of that, and I appreciate that.
And I think we've been in this position through the whole interim in this budget cycle, you know, the saying that we're kind of building the plane as we're flying it because of the way this money is coming in, that there needs to be opportunity to process some of it, but yet have the discussion about setting them off to the side in a reserve to be able to come back and have further conversations about as we move forward, rather than try to hold up the whole thing, figure out where we can go, and then what we need to do the follow-up work on, considering that this is a subcommittee closing. So with that, are there any other questions at this time? I don't think so. I believe we can go ahead and move on to the next budget amendment, Mr. Drost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Adam Drost, with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. On page 10 of your document is the next budget amendment A 215862710, that recommended federal American Rescue Plan Act elementary ESSER funding of $714.7 million in FY 2022. Would note a total of $1.072 billion will be provided to the state of Nevada under this program. But at this time, the federal government has made available 2/3 of this funding amount, with the remaining funding to be provided once the state submits its application indicating how those funds would be used. The NDE indicates the federal application is not yet available, but it continues to develop its expenditure plan so the application can be submitted once the federal application process begins. On page 11 of your packet, you can see how the funding is currently planned to be utilized by the department, with 90% of the funding, or $643.2 million, to be distributed to school districts and the state public charter school authority. For the 10% reserve funding to be used by the department indicates they will use $8 million for its Donors Choose partnership, $1.5 million for translation services for its public-facing documents. That's in addition to the previous funding that I discussed with the ESSER funding. That would provide a total of $2 million for translation services. Education for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology, or Education First robotics program, that would be established in every pre-K through 12 school in Nevada, as well as $150,000 for the Youth Career Pathways platform. That'd be a contract with Jobs for America's graduates to develop an education-focused labor market data dashboard with accompanying professional development training for educators. I would note at the bottom of that table, you will note that $56.8 million is yet to be determined by the department for this funding. On page 12 of your packet, during the budget hearing, there were various questions related to these programs, with the department providing additional detail. For the Donors Choose partnership, the department indicates that this is a website where teachers can post classroom project requests and donors can choose the projects they wish to support. The department indicated Nevada has been invited to be the first statewide participant in this partnership, and the NDE indicates that Nevada teachers have used this website in recent years and received over $12 million in funding for projects. According to the department, a teacher makes a funding request for an educational related project, including flexible seating, school garden supplies, instructional materials, and the like. And the teacher then coordinates with Donors Choose staff to review and possibly enhance the project to ensure it's complete and comprehensive. Once funding is provided for the project, Donors Choose orders the requested items and the material is sent directly to the teacher. The department indicates the average first-time request by teachers is approximately $800, and that's reflected in the recommended budget amount. The NDE hopes that by incentivizing teachers to create and post projects to the Donors Choose website, it would increase exposure and may also increase funding provided by private donations. There were also questions related to the Youth Careers Pathway platform, and during the budget hearing, the department was asked if the platform would be developed in collaboration with the Office of Workforce Innovation, or OWIN. The department indicates the Pathways to Career platform would be more than a labor market portal, but also an education-focused system that would provide regional labor market data that meets the needs of educators in identifying and preparing students for high-skill, high-wage, in-demand careers. The department indicates this education focus is outside of OWIN's current priorities and expertise, and would require Owen to contract out for the work being recommended. The department indicates this would cause significant delays for Nevada students, educators, and the business community as Owen secures the contracts and completes the various projects associated with this initiative, while most of the work for the Pathways to Career platform has already been built and implemented in other states. NDE intends to contract or sub-grant with Jobs for America's graduates, will in turn contract with Pathways to Careers for this service. The department indicates this would expedite the procurement process and access to these services and resources. Again, as I noted in the table, funding of $56.8 million has not yet been identified for expenditure by the department. And during the budget hearing, the NDE indicated that the expenditures reflected the budget amendment, reflected its plan as of April 1st. The department further indicated that it continues to work on developing its programs and expenditure plans, and that it would solicit additional stakeholder engagement prior to providing its application and expenditure plan to the federal government for review and approval. The final budget amendment was submitted. And Madam Chair, may I continue with the next budget amendment?
I think it would be best for us to stop again and possibly address any questions, knowing that we can always backtrack if we need to, just in case. And thank you for the follow-up information on the Youth Career Pathways platform, that this will be dollars that go to one entity and they will subcontract, or they will contract out with another entity. Is that a pure pass-through then? Will there be an administrative fee taken off the top before it gets to the actual contract?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm not have to comment on that.
Okay. Department of Education? Ms. Ebert, do you have an answer to that one?
Heidi Hartz for the
Oh,
record.
Ms. Hartz, thank you.
Deputy Superintendent for Business and Support Services here at the Department of Education. At this point in time, the intent is to subgrant with JAG and to ensure that their scope of work includes the acquisition and implementation of this additional service on their website, on their data dashboard. So they would not, at this point in time, are not envisioned to receive any oversight funding for administering this subgrant, or contract with Pathways. It is simply an opportunity for them to work directly with the vendor who will provide the capacity that they need to build out this platform.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I think that clarifies it a little bit more for me with that. So I have a question from Ms. Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much for the question. I appreciate it. So I'm looking at the Pathways to Careers website and their dashboard, and they seem to be their own individual standalone organization. The career support, career prepared, career engaged, and all of that. I guess I don't understand why we just wouldn't contract directly with the Pathway to Careers for the dashboard and for that to live within Department of Ed or grant access to the locals. Why we would be doing it feels like a subcontract to a subcontract to the subcontract. Why is that the best and most judicious way to do this versus just directly contracting with Pathway to Careers?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, so it isn't just one, what you have described is one component of a much larger program. So working both with the professional development and support for our educators as we move forward, as well as having the platform integrated. So it is a whole package and not just a one-off, as I would describe it.
Do you have a follow-up, Ms. Benitez Thompson?
I guess not this time. I just want to, it just seems like it might make the most sense to, like we have done with other type of software programs and applications that I've seen the Department of Education do successfully through dollars during the pandemic, which is say, let's go ahead and pay the cost to the vendor and then allow the different districts the ability to access that site, right? We've been doing that with different types of educational platforms. So to me, it just seems like if that's been working and we've seen our, we're at the Department of Education level opening up resources to the school districts and covering those costs, then that's a win, and a lot of those dollars get used. So it seems like why we would pass this off to another party to implement and to contract just to circle it back to us. It feels like there's an extra step in there, and I'm just wondering if that is going to be the best way to land on it.
And thank you, Ms. Benitez Thompson. I had some of the same concerns also about how this will actually work, because JAG isn't, I don't believe it's statewide in all 17 counties, but I'll stand to be corrected if necessary. It's not available in all schools, so I'm just trying to figure out how this component fits. And it may be the right place for it. There's just still some questions on, I think, the evolution of how this will actually work, and this new responsibility that they'll be taking on to deal with this dashboard. And I do appreciate the answers that we got, that this does not fit with Owen, but we always want to check to see when we've got another program going in the state that deals with career pathways, we want to see if it would possibly integrate. But the response that there's not integration on this one, and they do have two totally separate ways of going about it, was clarifying to me. So I do appreciate being able to put that in the rearview mirror and move forward. But there are still some concerns about how this platform will actually work and benefit the students across the state. Are there any other questions on this? Oh, Mr. Roberts, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know we talked about this Donor Choose partnership a little bit last time, and I'm familiar with Donor Choose. I've used it myself to help fund projects in my district. Just curious, is there a fee or a percentage that Donor Choose takes off of managing the program or us using that platform?
And Mr. Roberts, I believe that question was answered in the previous hearing, and I think it was 1%, but I'll be happy to have the Department of Education, but I believe it was very, very low. It was like a 1%.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I didn't recall if they did answer that last time or not, so I apologize for having you do it again.
Happy to have it stated again for the record. Ms. Ebert, Ms. Hartz?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, there is a percentage that we work with Donors Choose on their website. It is stated that it's taken out of the project base. What is listed on the website is 15%. However, we are working with Donors Choose to make sure it is not that percentage.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Roberts, follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so that's a big range, 1% and 15%. Do you know what we're shooting for?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, so that is still, we're working with Donors Choose on that piece and trying to identify, do not have the exact percentage for you right at this moment.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Mr. Roberts. Apparently I was wrong. I must have been thinking of a different program. Assemblyman Hafen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is on the Donors Choose program as well. Are the funds going to be just direct payments, or are they going to be used as match funds? Because I see here you're talking about trying to incentivize and increase the exposure. So I didn't know if they were going to be used for match donations or if they're just going to be one-time payments to each teacher.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I'm not sure who you would like to answer these questions, so that's why I'm pausing.
Mr. Hafen, who are you posing your question to? To Ms. Ebert?
Anyone that could answer the question?
I know you have very qualified staff as well, so I will dive in at this point with the donors choose, and we have teachers. The teachers do not purchase any of the products. What they do is they submit their proposal to the website. They work with the donors choose, and the donors choose actually does all of the ordering and the shipping directly to the educator.
I apologize. I must not have stated my question. My question was
You're allowed to follow up, Mr. Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was my colleague stated that he had donated to some of these different school programs, and so my question was are these just going to be payments for the teachers' projects directly to them, or they be used so if some of my colleagues donate that their funds would then be matched to try to incentivize and draw some more exposure to the program?
Thank you, Superintendent Ebert, for the record. So this allocation would go directly to Donors Choose, and they would manage the funds on behalf of the teachers of Nevada. And so your colleague that had mentioned, you as anyone across the nation or across the world can go on to the Donors Choose website. You can look at the projects that are posted by educators worldwide, and you could make a donation. And so what we're doing is we're setting up on behalf of Nevada's educators that ability for them to apply with specific projects.
So if I could restate it, basically the Department of Education is taking a portion of the dollars that they have received, putting it in a restricted fund with Donors Choose. Teachers in the state of Nevada, up to approximately 10,000 teachers, would be able to apply to Donors Choose to do a project that wouldn't prohibit anyone else from donating to it, but it's basically the state is putting money into this restricted fund just for Nevada teachers across the whole state, not just one county, and that would help subsidize those particular teachers to get more projects out on the road, out on the street. So am I capsulizing it, Ms. Ebert? Because, this.
That was perfect.
Got it. Okay, good.
And
So
thank you,
just
Madam
want
Chair.
to
I
make sure
appreciate
that we
that.
were that and go from there, so. Are there other questions? Ms. Senator Ganser?
Thank you, Chair Carlton. So I'm looking at the Donors Choose website, and what I can tell you is that there's basically a pie, and it does talk about program services, that 95% of the money goes to program services, 1% to general and administrative, and fundraising is 4%. So I think that's probably where the confusion is, because when you look at their website, it's not clear that they're 15%. So I have a couple of questions. One is, if it is a rate at 15% or something like that, can we cap that? Can we negotiate and cap that? This committee cap that? And the other thought I had is, a lot of times when you buy tickets, it's a plus up. So if someone's going to donate $100, there's a service fee of $3 or $5 or whatever it would be. I also wonder if their website, given that we have $8 million in this bucket, if they were to receive 15%, that's about $1.2 million. Is there a way to make our $8 million whole, and that the person who's donating plus ups as a service fee? And again, I haven't donated through this, so I don't know if there's an option where they pay the service fee versus the state paying the service fee, or capping what we actually put towards the expense side on their end. Thank you.
And thank you, Senator. I know I had seen that 1% somewhere, so thank you for, I feel much better. I'm not as tired as I thought I was. So, Ms. Ebert, is there, in your discussions with Donors Choose, as we move forward, would there be an opportunity to address it in that way? I know in a lot of nonprofit and donation worlds, you get the opportunity to pick up that carrying fee so that the nonprofit doesn't take the ding. So is that part of the ongoing discussions with Donors Choose?
Heidi Hartz for the record. We'd be happy to add that to the conversations that we are having with Donors Choose. As the superintendent mentioned, we're certainly working consistently and aggressively to to try to limit the amount of funds that would be invested in administrative costs so we can maximize the funds that would be available for investment into the projects proposed by our teachers.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate that. And we believe those are good indicators of where we're going. Ms. Bedias Thompson.
Thank you so much. And I said it before, and I'll say it again, just that if we can invest the money straight into the education system, then, and we're doing things right, then we don't always need, I mean, Donors Choose is doing wonderful work. And as I look on here, I'm like, these are all great things. These are all wonderful things. These are all things that ideally we are already funding in education. I'm looking at my district and I see one of my Title I schools is asking for a vacuum so that they can clean their classroom. And I want to burst out in tears because I'm like, here we are spending all of this money on education and we're trying to get more money in education, yet they have to go out and beg for a vacuum and they have to do it through a nonprofit. And so I get this, I get why it's important. I see a lot of STEM stuff in here and it's really good, but then I see just a lot of basic capital stuff too. And I'm just like, if we took $8 million and we invested it into capital needs as one-time shots for cleaning, then I don't know. I guess I get myself sideways and I'm constantly at war with myself, I think, on some of our public policy
And I totally,
visions.
and thank you, Majority Leader. The thing we always have to keep in the back of our minds with these dollars, though, is this is a one-time dollar thing. This is not something that we can build into anything. This is a way to be able to get the money on the street, to have it do some good, but not have an ongoing roll-up, mess with the base, all that type of thing. We always have to keep that in the backs of our minds that, once these projects are done, hopefully we'll incentivize more folks like us to go look at the schools on their webpage to possibly help in some way. But these are just one-time around the block dollars. So, Senator Dunn-Loop?
Can I just do one clarifying?
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak teacher talk for a minute. Many times as teachers, we go to our administrator and we say, I need science supplies, but I don't want to go say I need a vacuum, or vice versa. So I think that Chair Carlton is absolutely right. These are one-time expenditures. And but with that being said, if you're doing a STEM project, this may be something that you can roll over to the following year. You can use these materials, or if I'm doing a garden project, I can use these funds to do that, and then I can roll them over to the other year. So I think that we can't get lost in the fact that there are highly capable teachers who are doing very effective jobs and are wanting to enhance their classroom anytime they can. So when you read through some of these programs and you see even the flexible seating, the musical instruments, the gardening, the art supplies, whatever it is, I think we can't forget that these are things that teachers are doing to make their classrooms better for the kids in our state. And so I just, as a teacher, I just want to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So with that, committee members, if there are no other questions at this time on this particular budget amendment, I believe we can go ahead and move on to the next. Mr. Drost?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Adam Drost with LCB Fiscal. On April 15th, the Governor's Finance Office submitted a third budget amendment A 2163-02710, that recommends additional total federal funding of $517.8 million in FY22 that would be provided to school districts, charter schools, and non-public schools, as indicated on the table on page 13 of your packet. This includes ESSER 2 funding that was accepted by the Interim Finance Committee in February 2021 of $429.6 million. ESSER 1 funding that was accepted by the Interim Finance Committee in May 2020 of $69 million. And federal assistance to non-public school funding that was accepted by the IFC in February 2021 of $19.2 million. Although the IFC approved the acceptance of this grant funding in the current biennium, the budget amendment recommends this funding be included in this budget in the upcoming biennium to provide the department with authority to expend this funding and provide funding to school districts, charter schools, and non-public school. During the budget hearing last week, the department indicated this funding is provided to school districts, charter schools, and non-public schools on a reimbursement basis. And that's consistent with the State Office of Grant Procurement Coordination and Management's grants manual. This also allows the department to review expenditures to ensure they are aligned with the program and are allowable by the federal guidelines. And Madam Chair, that's the third budget amendment, if you'd like me to stop there.
All righty, before we try to address the motion that we would need to encapsulate all of this, there is still noted from earlier, Mr. Dross, did you have something?
Would you like me to complete the rest of the closing document?
Yes,
Okay, great.
I'll hold my question, thank you.
So again, the subcommittee during the budget hearing expressed concern that the expenditures reflected in these budget amendments would be included in the department's base budget in the upcoming in the 2023-25 biennium. In response to those concerns, the department indicated these expenditures would not be included in the base budget, with the exception of the remaining federal funding that would be available in FY24 and reflected in this budget. The department further confirmed that these expenditures were one-time and not intended to be ongoing expenditures. As I previously noted, the NDE has not identified all expenditures that would be funded with the American Rescue Plan or ARP Act ESSER funding, with expenditures of approximately $56.8 million not yet identified. During the department's budget hearing, the subcommittee expressed interest in measures that would allow legislators to participate in the review and approval of that funding once the NDE develops a plan. Accordingly, the subcommittee may consider a recommendation to establish and place the unidentified expenditures in a reserve category in this budget. This would provide the NDE with time to develop a plan for spending that funding, approach the IFC with that plan, and receive IFC approval to transfer the funding to an expenditure category once the plan is approved. As I noted earlier, the budget amendment also recommends Gear 2 funding of $3.2 million to provide 376.5 pre-K seats funded with the governor's recommended per seat cost of $8,410. However, since it is unknown at this time whether the legislature will approve the governor's recommendation to provide a standard per seat cost for pre-K in the 2021-23 biennium, the subcommittee may wish to approve this funding, but require the funding allocation to be based on the final distribution methodology approved by the 2021 legislature for the state pre-K program. And I would note that budget is scheduled to close next week on April 27th. So, Madam Chair, the decisions for the subcommittee are laid out on page 14 of your closing packet, and I'll step through these.
I'm going to stop you again, Mr. Dross, for just a moment, because I want to make sure any questions get addressed before we actually get into that conversation. So, committee, I appreciate the fact that that there's still those dollars that have not yet been identified. I think there's a lot of work in being able to make sure that these dollars do land in the right spot. We've had a lot of conversations about this. And I would be leaning towards putting those dollars in a reserve and having them come back and talk to us at IFC about how those dollars would be needed to move forward. In addition to that, so Mr. Drost, hang on to your chair. You're probably going to have to help us with this. The issue of the incentives for students, I think we'd like some more information on, since I don't believe that was really thoroughly vetted the first time around, and I'm not sure we have all the information on that would make the committee comfortable in moving that one forward. And also the career pathways, how that is actually going to work. I'm not sure we would want to put them all in the same reserve account. It may need to be two because of the implementation dates, when they have to be committed and when they had to be expended. So we would want to make sure that we didn't cause any issues there, because these are multiple funding streams, all running parallel with each other, but they all diverge at different times depending upon when those dollars have to be committed and then hit the streets. So as we move through this next discussion point, and I'd like the committee to weigh in here, that would be the direction that I think, as I've heard the questions from the committee through this conversation, to where they would be most comfortable in being able to get those answers before those dollars are actually committed on those things. So with that, I'm going to call on Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly support the idea of putting some of these funds into reserve and have the ability for the legislature to get more information as it comes back to us. Can I ask a sort of tangential question really quickly to Mr.
Yes,
Drost?
please do.
Thank you. So, Mr. Drost, on the various budget amendments, for the funds that are directed towards the districts, are they all being handled the same way across the budget amendments, that the American Rescue Plan funds are going to be distributed on a reimbursement basis, similar to the ESSER 1 and 2 funds, as outlined in the on page 13 of your document? Trying to keep
Senator,
track.
that is correct. The department indicates that they handle all of these consistently with these federal grants in our reimbursement basis.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So committee members, any other questions or comments at this time? Chair Dundaraloo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve.
Nope. I don't want a motion. I just want to know if you had any questions.
Oh, apologies.
That's okay.
Well, I guess she
That's
knows
good.
my MO, that I have questions.
Not
No,
yet. We're
but,
not quite ready yet.
no, but I will say that I am glad to see the 376 pre-K seats in here. I am thrilled to see that. I think that is such an important piece for us to grow in this state. And the earlier we can get these children, the better off we are. So thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me.
I just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity. Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would certainly support pulling those two items out and putting them in an account. I'm really concerned about the 8 million allocation to donor choose, and that we don't have enough money, or excuse me, enough information on how much is going to be pulled away from actually getting 2 teachers in the classroom. I would feel real comfortable if we could do something with that as well. I don't know if that's an appetite of everyone on the committee, but I would certainly like to get more information on that before we move forward.
I'm not sure I would be comfortable in actually setting that one aside. I think we could get more information before the full budget closing, before the full committee on that amount. They could keep working on it. We did have a very thorough discussion about donors choose in the previous meeting. The other two weren't quite as complete. So I'm not sure that I would want to encapsulate that one. I think we can still get the information on that one moving forward. I believe they're in the negotiation process, and I wouldn't want to short circuit the negotiation process by donors choose thinking that we're not going to move forward with it. It's still a conversation piece, so I would prefer that one stay outside and go ahead and keep it in the budget amendment right now for process sake, and then get the answers on that one when we get to full committee close to make sure that we're there. Mr. Roberts.
So thank you. And so at closing, what would that look out on full committee? So we
So
would be
as
able
we-
to get answers on that, and we would be able to vet that item further?
I think that would give the Department of Education the opportunity to be able to get some of the answers that they would need and possibly even be able to respond to us before we get to full budget closing, so that can be part of the responses that we get, those big packets of all the answers that we get from everyone. Be able to answer it there. Might even be able to answer the other ones too. But I'm comfortable in actually setting those in a reserve and having future conversations about it. Whereas this one, I think we just need some answers to process. I think there's 2 different conversations with these different items. As far as that moving forward, knowing full well that everything that happens at subcommittee budget closings gets reported to the full committee, but it never hamstrings the full committee. We'd like to give them a complete product because it makes it a lot easier in the long run to do it, but sometimes that just can't happen, and we do have to have further conversations. And when you've got 3 large budget amendments that are basically creating whole new budgets, we need the time to be able to process everything and give staff the opportunity to get all the answers that they need. So I wouldn't see putting that amount in a budget reserve. We just need answers. These others, I think we need to set aside and have them come back and actually talk to us before we send the money out the door.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize for not knowing the full process
Oh, no,
on how
that's-
you'd be able to do that. So I appreciate it,
Yep.
and I'm comfortable with that.
I remember sitting in the front row in 2011 asking almost the exact same questions. So with that, Senator Reddy.
I'm just lucky enough to be in the back row, but still in my first year on finance. So if I could follow up with that, just to make sure that I'm understanding it. So then would those dollar amounts that get set aside for those two programs, then they would just be treated very similarly to the other recommendation about the additional 50 million plus or minus, where if it doesn't get resolved by May 31st, it could get resolved at IFC later? Is that generally how it would work?
That would be where I'm leaning, but I'll rely on staff to make sure that we do this the appropriate way. As I said, I don't want to restrict these dollars or cause any problems moving forward. So Ms. Kaufman, did you want to weigh in here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that would be correct. So if the subcommittee wished to put these revenues, or excuse me, the revenues into an expenditure for a reserve, then the agency would come back to IFC to request to move those dollars into a category to be spent at a later date and provide that work program to the interim finance committee with the justification.
Okay, so I think the way I'm understanding this is the distinction is with Donor Choose, our intention is to get more information, take care of it at the close, and on the May 31st day, that's done and has a bow on it, where anything that goes in reserves, there's more leeway and it can go to IFC. So that is a very helpful distinction for me. Thank you.
And there's nothing that would say that that conversation will not choose between now and the time we do full budget closings also. But definitely with the 56.8, set that aside for reserves and have them come back to IFC. Okay? So with that, I think I've seen enough heads shake in the positive motion, not thoroughly confused. So Mr. Drost, hate to throw you that boomerang, so now you understand where the committee's intention is, so that if you could help us make this as cohesive of a motion as possible, it would be, you will have definitely earned your pay for the last 80 days. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll try and encapsulate through a fifth bullet what that motion would be. So the decision for the subcommittee, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of Budget Amendment A2158-52710, Budget Amendment A2158-62710, and Budget Amendment A21630-2710? Second item is technical adjustments to reflect measures of academic progress assessment funding of $820,855 in FY22 and $876,535 in FY23, contingent upon the subcommittee's approval to continue these assessments in the 2021-23 biennium in the NDE assessments and accountability budget, funding of $140,000 for the Department of Public Safety staff that support the Safe Voice program in FY23 rather than FY22, a contract education programs professional position to assist with the administration of the emergency assistant to non-public schools program, reflecting the planned FY 2024 administrative expenditures of $125,765 in FY23 for the ESSER II funding, adding a contract school nurse coordinator position utilizing federal ESSER II funding, increasing the cost of the contract position equivalent to an education programs professional position that would support the high school graduation incentives program to reflect the cost for a full year in FY22 and FY23, reflect the ESSER II administrative and non-administrative costs between separate expenditure categories, and balancing budgeted expenditures by adjusting revenue and translation services expenditures between ESSER II and American Rescue Plan Act's elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding. The third item is placing the American Rescue Plan Act elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding of $56.8 million that has not yet been identified for expenditure in this budget's reserve, which would require the department to approach the IFC and receive approval before expending that funding. And the fourth item is Gear 2 funding of $3.2 million for pre-K seats that must be allocated based on the final distribution methodology approved by the 2021 legislature for the state pre-K program. The additional point for the subcommittee's consideration is placing all funding in reserve for the following programs: the Incentives for High School Students program and the Youth Career Pathways platform. That funding would be placed in reserve, and the department would need to come to IFC to request authority, provide a plan, additional information, and request authority to expend that funding before it can be used by the department. In addition, for the Donors Choose program, additional information would be provided by the department, and it would be presented when this budget goes before the full committee closing. But that expenditure authority would remain in the subcommittee's recommendation. I hope that captures everything, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dross. Excellent job. Senator Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to move that we approve this budget as staff stated.
I have a motion from Senator Loop, second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Now is the time for the conversation. So with that, any other conversation necessary from members of the subcommittee on this item? Not seeing any. So with that, I'll go ahead and call for the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Thank you very much, Mr. Drost. Very, very complicated budget to get through. Appreciate it.
And Madam Chair, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in that prior motion, but technical authority for technical adjustments.
And
Confirm that I have the authority.
and I would consider that part of the motion with staff's authority for technical adjustments. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for confirming, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yeah. That's the only part we really understood. Thanks a lot. Okay.
That was my cheat motion.
Okay, so with that, I believe we can move on to the next item, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Adam Dross with LCB Fiscal. The next budget is the Assessments and Accountability budget, which can be found on page 15 of your packet. This budget includes funding for administering student assessments. There are two major closing issues on this budget, and the first can be found on page 17 of your packet, which includes the restoration of measures of academic progress assessments. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $1 million in each year of the 21-23 biennium to continue the administration of the measures of academic progress, or MAP, assessments that are administered to students in kindergarten through grade 3 as a reading assessment. Pursuant to NAC 388-660, the measures of academic progress assessment is required to be used to assess pupils' proficiency in the subject of reading. When the Read by Grade 3 program initially began, school districts utilized the Read by Grade 3 grant funds to purchase MAP assessments. However, it was determined that savings could be generated by utilizing a statewide contract for these MAP assessments. The 2017 legislature approved funding of $1.7 million in each year of the 2017-19 biennium to fund measures of academic progress assessments. And this funding has continued in subsequent biennia and is recommended to continue in the 21-23 biennium with the general fund appropriations of $1 million in each year of the biennium. However, the governor recommends the Read by Grade 3 program funding be placed in the state education funding account to support base per pupil funding in the new pupil-centered funding plan, which may be used by school districts and charter schools for unrestricted purposes. Accordingly, Read by Grade 3 funding would no longer be administered or provided as a separate K-12 program by the NDE. The NDE indicates it plans to continue to support school districts and charter schools in the implementation of early literacy instruction and provide support to educators across the state by providing professional development. The department indicates the MAP assessments would continue to provide educators with the tool to identify the strengths of students and set goals for instruction, communicate milestones, and allow the continuous monitoring of student progress. During the budget hearing on March 3rd, the subcommittee questioned why the administration of these assessments would need to continue in the 21-23 biennium, given the planned implementation of the pupil-centered funding plan. The department indicated that the only anticipated change was the method by which the funding would be distributed to support the program. The department indicated there were no planned changes to the literacy requirements included in Chapter 388 of NRS, which includes NRS 388157, that requires the Board of Trustees of each school district and the governing body of each charter school to prepare a plan to improve the literacy of pupils enrolled in an elementary school. NRS 388159 requires a principal of a public elementary school to designate a licensed teacher employed by the school to serve as a literacy specialist to provide professional development and implement a system of support in the subject area of reading. The department indicated MAP assessments would provide data to measure student growth and literacy that could be used by literacy specialists and teachers to ensure the literacy requirements included in NRS are met. Would note the 2019 legislature approved funding of $1.7 million in each year of the 2019-21 biennium for the MAP assessments. Although the executive budget only reflects funding of $1 million in each year of the upcoming biennium, it should be noted the NDE plans to also utilize federal ESSER 2 funding of $820,855 in FY22 and $876,535 in FY23 for these assessments. And that was previously heard in the NDE COVID-19 budget that was just closed by the subcommittee. This would restore funding to allow the assessments to continue to be administered to pupils in kindergarten through grade 3. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend general fund appropriations of $1 million in each year of the 21-23 biennium to continue the administration of the measures of academic progress assessments? Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Mr. Drost. So it's my understanding, and I just want to make sure that I restate it so that I have it clear in my brain, that in 19, this was funded at $1.7 million in each year with general fund. This time around, it's going to be funded with $1 million in general fund and then backed up with the federal dollars. The ESSER dollars can be used. So there's a change in federal fund, but in essence, we are still funding it at the same level.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure I had that wrapped up. So, committee members, are there any questions on this particular item at this time? Senator Kiekefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I may have to defer to Senator Dondero Loop, because did we have a bill that changed the number of years that MAP assessments had to be administered? I mean, this proposes funding for grades K through 3, but did we just have a bill that said it was sort of at the discretion of the districts?
Senator?
Thank you, Senator Kiekefer, for depending on my knowledge. I appreciate the kudos, but I would like to ask the department to answer that question.
So Senator Dondero Loop would like to phone a friend.
Superintendent Ebert, is there a possibility that you could be my friend today?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Dondero Loop, Senator Kiekefer. I am asking a clarifying question first, Senator Kiekefer. Are you asking about the current administration of the Read by Grade 3 program and the assessments as a continuum? Or are you asking about what may happen into the future?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Superintendent. And it's perspective, right? Because I think it's a bill that's gone through one house of this body, but I believe that we just passed a bill that changed the testing, or provided some discretion to either schools or districts over the years for MAP testing. And I just want to be clear that if we approve this funding, that the expectation of this body would be that we test literacy in grades K1, 2, and 3 so that we have consistent data going forward. So, and I just want to make sure that the legislation that we're processing is consistent with the intent of the financing that we're providing. And I can go back and deal with it and get an answer for myself probably before we go to full closing, but it just piqued my brain. Thanks.
Superintendent Ebert?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Superintendent Ebert. So there were two bills that were moving forward, both Senate Bill 2 as well as Senate Bill 76 that do have components of assessment, and I believe you're going to be talking about one of them shortly. However, in both of those bills are in alignment with what you see before you, so that we would be administering the program for our children, our Read by Grade 3 program, with the MAPS testing in grades K through 3.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Superintendent Ebert. So, Senator, you've used your one phone a friend for today. I just want to put that on the record. So.
I was actually thinking I better just sit here quietly.
Senator Severs-Gensert.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. And I just had more of a comment. I think we need to continue the testing, and I'm happy to support this funding. We're making some progress as far as the NAEPS test. In fourth grade, we had our students converge to the national average, and I am concerned with some of the changing in funding because we're reducing the read by grade 3. Though I do understand there's some federal funds that could help supplement that. But I think we have to continue to test to know where where our students are. Because when you think about it, if you can solve the reading problem, if you can make sure your students are proficient by first, second, third grade, the entire trajectory of how our students will be doing throughout their K through 12 education will improve significantly. And we actually saw math move when reading moved, it just didn't converge. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Severs-Gensert. The one thing I'll always remember Senator Woodhouse taught me was, first through third, you learn to read. Fourth after, you read to learn. So we understand how important that is. Any other questions from any other committee members on this particular item at this time? Seeing none, Senator Don-Darrow-Loop, did you have a motion for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we recommend the general fund appropriations of $1.0 million in each year of the 21-23 biennium to continue the administration of the measures of academic progress assessments.
Second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on to item number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second item is the elimination of the end-of-course exams. The governor recommends in the base budget the elimination of end-of-course exams that are typically administered to students when they complete certain high school level math and English language arts courses. As background, the 2019 legislature approved funding of approximately $1 million in each year of the current biennium for these end-of-course exams. However, as a budget reduction measure, the legislature eliminated funding for the exams in FY 2021 during the 31st special session with the passage of AB 3. The administration of end-of-course exams has been suspended based on the governor's emergency directive 005. And fiscal staff would also note that a February 2019 study regarding the streamlining of Nevada's K-12 assessment suggested the NDE consider eliminating end-of-course exams. NRS 390-700, the State Board of Education shall adopt regulations that prescribe the courses of study for which end-of-course exams must be administered and the percentage the end-of-course exams would comprise of a pupil's overall grade in the course. However, SB 76 has been amended by the Senate Committee on Education to eliminate NRS 390-700 and in turn end-of-course exams from statute. And I would note that bill has been amended and re-referred to Senate Finance. During the budget hearing on March 3rd, the subcommittee asked the department why the governor is recommending the permanent elimination of end-of-course exams. And in response, the department indicated that the current college and career readiness assessment, the HCT assessment, meets these assessment needs by measuring student progress. Accordingly, the department indicates the end-of-course exams were no longer needed. So the decision for the subcommittee: does the subcommittee wish to recommend the elimination of the end-of-course exams in the base budget as recommended by the governor, contingent upon passage of SB 76 or other legislation that would eliminate NRS 390-700? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Drost. Are there any questions on this item from any committee members at this time? Seeing none, Senator Don-Darrow-Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we eliminate the end-of-course exams in the base budget as recommended by the governor, contingent upon passage of Senate Bill 76 or other legislation that would eliminate NRS 390.0700.
I have a motion from Senator Don-Darrow-Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Other closing items, Mr. Drost?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Other closing items include restoration of expenditures for the council to establish academic standards, some base budget adjustments that includes a budget amendment A214-752697 that was submitted by the Governor's Finance Office that recommends reducing expenditures by $175,633 in FY22 and $10,088 in FY23. The budget amendment would provide general fund reductions of $167,149 in FY22 and $945 in FY23, and reductions in federal state assessment grant revenue of $8,484 in FY22 and $9,143 in FY23. And that budget amendment appears reasonable. The Governor's Finance Office also indicates a new contract for the Smarter Balanced Assessments Consortium, or SBAC assessments, was recently finalized. As part of that new contract, the Governor's Office indicates these expenditures are projected to be greater than recommended in the executive budget. And the Governor's Finance Office requests technical adjustments to increase these assessment expenditures by $264,046 in FY22 and $328,046 in FY23, which would be funded with general fund appropriations. There's also a decision at E710 that requests replacement equipment. However, the department indicates this funding is no longer required since the CARES Act funding was utilized to purchase those computers. And the Governor's Office concurs that that elimination should be, that decision is no longer needed. So accordingly, fiscal staff recommends this decision not be approved by a subcommittee. Finally, other closing item 4 would allow the department, consistent with the action of the 2019 legislature, the ability to transfer general fund appropriations between fiscal years in this budget with IFC approval. And if this recommendation is approved by the subcommittee, enabling legislation would be language would be included in the 2021 Appropriations Act. Fiscal staff recommends other closing item 4 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 2 be closed as revised by budget amendment A214-752697 and with the noted technical adjustments. Other closing item 3 not be approved and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Drost. Are there questions from any subcommittee members at this time? Not seeing any. Senator Dondera-Lupe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move that we recommend that the other closing items 1 and 4 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item number 2 be closed as revised by budget amendment 214-752-697, and with the noted technical adjustments, other closing item 3 not be approved and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Have a motion by Senator Dondera-Lupe, a second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. I believe we can move on to the next budget item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next budget can be found on page 21 of your packet, and this is the Safe and Respectful Learning budget. There are no major closing issues in this budget, and other closing items include bullying prevention material, expiring grants, and replacement equipment. There's also a base budget technical adjustment to reflect the updated classification for some new positions that were approved by IFC that would support a new grant. And after review by the Division of Human Resource Management, the Governor's Finance Office has asked for a technical adjustment to correct the classification of those positions. In addition, the governor recommended funding for the annual licensing fee for the Safe Voice mobile application and reporting system due to the expiration of a grant that previously supported that activity. However, during the budget hearing, the subcommittee expressed interest in possibly using federal funds to support that fee, and the NDE indicated that the federal ESSER funds could be used for that purpose. And as previously approved by the subcommittee, ESSER 2 funds were approved for that purpose. So due to the NDE's plan to utilize federal funding to support the Safe Voice licensing fee expenditure in the upcoming biennium, fiscal staff recommends decision at E275 that was amended by budget amendment A214832721 not be approved by the subcommittee. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 5 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 6 be closed with the noted technical adjustments. Other closing item 7 not be approved as recommended by the governor or amended by budget amendment A214832721, and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Drost. Are there any questions on this item? Not seeing anyone wishing to be recognized. Senator Dondera-Lupe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move that we close this budget as staff recommended.
close as staff indicated. Thank you very much. Second from Ms. Howdigy. Questions or comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. One moment. I saw too many empty chairs and just wanted to make sure we were good. Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next budget item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now begin presenting the NDE budgets, which the subcommittee has not previously reviewed and for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations. I will pause following my presentation for each budget to allow for questions. And when I presented the last budget in this group and questions have been addressed, I will provide a single motion for closing consideration of all these budgets. The first is the NDE Individuals with Disabilities Education Act budget, which can be found on page 25 of your packet. And this Department of Education's Individuals with Disabilities budget includes federal IDEA Act funding and administrative support for the state's gifted and talented education program. There are no major closing issues in the budget, and other closing items include replacement equipment. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions on this budget.
Questions? Senator Kefauver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Drost. Out of curiosity, what's driving the significant increase in federal funds between current fiscal year and next fiscal year?
Senator, I know that is based on a formula by the federal government. The grant documentation was provided in support of that amount. As far as specifics, if any additional information is needed, the department would have to comment on what is actually driving that increase.
Okay. I don't think it's necessary at this point. I just was curious. I'll look it up. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we can go ahead and move on, Mr. Drost. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next budget is the NDE Data Systems Management budget, which can be found on page 27 of your packet. Again, this was not heard by the subcommittee, and staff is responsible for developing recommendations for this budget. There are no major closing issues in this budget, and other closing items include in-state and out-of-state travel. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions on this budget.
Questions? Seeing none, we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So fiscal staff recommends the following budgets be closed as recommended by the governor and request authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. Budget account 101-2715, NDE Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and budget account 101-2716, NDE Data Systems Management budget. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Drost. So with that, Senator Dondero-Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move that we close this budget as stated by staff.
Thank you very much. I have a motion from Senator Dondero-Loop, second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Thank you very much, Mr. Drost. Moving on.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I think it's my turn next. For the record, J. Marie Mangoba from the Fiscal Analysis Division, and I'm here to present 9 closing documents for the Department of Education, starting on page 31, with the Educator Effectiveness Budget, which was heard by the subcommittee on March 3rd, 2021. There's only one major closing issue for this budget. The governor recommends general fund reductions of $97,192 and federal fund reductions of $98,192 over the 2021-23 biennium by transferring one education program's professional position from this budget to the educator licensure budget. The department indicates the recommendation would align the duties of the position with the appropriate budget. Additionally, The recommendation that the department indicates that the majority of the position's duties and responsibilities are more directly tied to the educator licensure process and continuum, and therefore is more appropriately funded with educator fee revenues in the educator licensure budget. The information in the middle of page 32 provides the duties and responsibilities of the education program's professional position. During the budget hearing, the subcommittee expressed concerns with the appropriateness of funding this position entirely with educator licensing fee revenues, since this position provides support for state-funded programs. The department indicates this position currently spends no more than 5% of its time providing support for the aforementioned state-funded programs, and the existing management analyst position in this budget assumed the majority of the responsibilities related to those state-funded programs. So the decision for the committee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend transferring one education program's professional position from this budget to the educator licensure budget and funding the position with reserves funded with educator license fees totaling $195,384 over the 2021-23 biennium in the educator licensure budget, and provide fiscal staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
And if you could go ahead and do the other closing items also, and we'll do it all at one motion. Thank you very much.
Certainly, Madam Chair. There are two other closing items which appears reasonable to staff. Fiscal staff recommends other closing item 1 and 2 be closed as recommended by the governor, and requests authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mangola. So with that, are there any questions from any committee members at this time on this budget item? Not seeing any. Senator Dondera-Lupe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we close this budget as stated by staff, including the other closing items 1 and 2 be closed as recommended by the governor, and requesting the authority for the staff to make the technical adjustments.
Thank you, Senator. I have a motion from Senator Dondera-Lupe, a second from Assemblywoman Hodegui. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing none. Passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on to the next item, please, Ms. Mangola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next budget is the educator licensure budget, which was heard by the subcommittee on March 3, 2021. There's only one major closing issue for this budget. The governor recommends reserve reductions of $8,839 over the 2021-23 biennium to reclassify one program officer position as a chief compliance investigator position and one administrative assistant position to a compliance investigator position. The department indicates this recommendation would align the duties performed by the with the appropriate position class and allow the department to improve its ability to respond to the needs of school districts and educators by completing background investigations on licensees in a timely manner. The table on page 36 provides the caseload of the 3-member background investigation unit, which include the number of completed background investigation, number of complaints received regarding alleged educator misconduct, and number of completed investigations involving alleged educator misconduct in fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20, and projected for fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. According to the department, the duties of the administrative assistant position have evolved, and it has been performing functions more appropriate for a compliance investigator position. However, the administrative assistant position does not have the full authority to conduct background investigation, and this reclassification would provide greater flexibility for the unit to complete its work. The information on page 37 provides the proposed duties and responsibilities of the investigator position. Regarding the reclassification of one program officer position to a chief compliance investigator position, this recommendation only changes the title of the position and is cost neutral. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend reclassifying one program officer position to a chief compliance investigator position and one administrative assistant position to a compliance investigator position, reducing reserves by $8,839 over the 2021-23 biennium, and provide fiscal staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary?
Thank you very much, Ms. Mangola, and I appreciate the chart on page 36 that answered a number of the questions that I had when we had the original conversation about these positions and the conversion of them. Any other questions or comments from any other committee members at this time? Not seeing any. Senator Dundera-Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve the recommendation as stated by staff.
I have a motion from Senator Dundera-Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on to the next item, please, Ms. Mangola.
Thank you, Madam.
Ms. Mangola, you're muted. Has to happen to us at least
I
once a day.
apologize for that.
That's okay.
I apologize for that. On page 38 are the other closing items, and staff would just note that item number 2 relates to the recommendation to transfer one education program's professional position from the educator effectiveness budget into this budget. Fiscal staff recommends other closing item 1 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item number 2 be closed consistent with the subcommittee's action in the educator effectiveness budget regarding the governor's recommendation to transfer one education program's professional position from the educator effectiveness budget to this budget and funding the position with reserves and request authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Questions, committee? Seeing none, Senator Dundera-Loop.
I move that we approve the recommendation as stated by staff.
Thank you. I have a motion from Senator Dundera-Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on to the next item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 39 is the student and school support budget, which was heard by the subcommittee on March 9, 2021. There are 3 major closing issues for this budget. The first major closing issue is the governor's recommendation for one new education program's professional position funded with federal student support and academic enrichment or Title IV Part A grant funds of $22,072 and reductions in expenditure for a contract position totaling $187,252 over the 2021-23 biennium. Currently, the federal Title IV Part A grant program is administered by one full-time contract position. The department indicates the U.S. Department of Education has an expectation that a state education agency, which in this particular case is the Department of Education, use their set-aside administrative funds for staff dedicated to administer and monitor the education programs in their state. However, the federal Title IV Part A grant program is the only federal consolidated title program that has no designated staff member to monitor the program. The department further indicates the existing contract position performing these duties does not have access to all the department's resources and trainings to effectively manage the Title IV Part A grant program. And staff would just note that the decision unit includes the elimination of the contract position prior to October 1st, 2021, which is the budgeted start date for the new education program's professional position. However, the subcommittee may wish to consider providing support for 3 months worth of funding from July 1st, 2021 through September 30, 2021 for the contract position to ensure continuous administrative support for the Title IV Part A grant program. Accordingly, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to reflect 3 months worth of funding totaling $24,388 for contract services in fiscal year 22. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approving the governor's recommendation for one new education program's professional position funded with federal Title IV Part A grant funds of $22,072 and reduction in expenditures for a contract position totaling $162,864 over the 2021-23 biennium with a technical adjustment noted by fiscal staff and provide fiscal staff with authority to make any other technical adjustments as necessary.
Questions from committee members? Not seeing any. Senator Dundera-Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move that we close this budget as stated by staff.
Thank you very much. I have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Hodeggy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on to item number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 41 is the second major closing issue for this budget. The governor recommends general fund appropriation of $165,000 in fiscal year 23 for external evaluation to restore the program funding reductions approved by Assembly Bill 3 of the 31st special session. Combined with the amount included in the base budget, this recommendation would provide total funding of $265,000 in fiscal year 23 for external evaluation. This would restore the funding for external evaluation to the level that was approved by the 2019 legislature for fiscal year 21. For background information, the 2019 legislature approved to fund the cost of external evaluation to measure the progress and outcomes of the following 8 programs: Zoom School, Victory School, Social or Other Licensed Mental Health Worker, Read by Grade 3, Nevada Ready 21 Technology, Underperforming Turnaround Schools, Great Teaching and Leading Fund, and the new Nevada Education Funding Plan. It should be noted that the 2019 legislature approved funding for external evaluation for each of those programs for accountability and to provide a basis for the governor's finance office and the legislature to determine if funding should continue or be modified for those programs. Staff would note that the statutory requirements for the external evaluations for the new Nevada Education Funding Plan, the Zoom and Victory Schools program are expiring on June 30, 2021. Additionally, the governor recommends 6 of the 8 programs to be transferred to the state education funding account to implement the modified pupil-centered funding plan. And finally, the governor also recommends to eliminate the Underperforming Turnaround Schools program to meet the budget reserve scenario issued by the governor for the 2021-23 biennium. During the budget hearing, the department indicated that although the governor recommends not restoring the funding for the Underperforming Schools program in the 2021-23 biennium, it plans to repurpose those funds to conduct an in-depth evaluation on other programs or an evaluation on services such as Zoom and Victory programs, which may require additional funding for evaluation since the funding will be provided to the students under the pupil-centered funding plan as opposed to schools. The department further indicated external evaluations are important to ensure programs are not negatively impacted by transferring the funding of those programs in the pupil-centered funding plan and would allow them to continue assessing and monitoring programs and services that provides positive results. Since the state is still recovering from the financial crisis brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, and a majority of the aforementioned state-funded programs are recommended to be transferred to the pupil-centered funding plan and therefore do not require an evaluation, the subcommittee may wish to not approve the funding for external evaluations in fiscal year 23. If the subcommittee chooses this option, the department could explore other methods to fund these evaluations if it wishes. And as indicated previously by Mr. Dross, the department recently received federal ESSER grant reserve funding of approximately $47.7 million by the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act and reserve funding of $107.2 million of the American Rescue Plan Act. If the department wishes to complete evaluations over the 2021-23 biennium, it could explore funding these external evaluations utilizing those recent federal grant funding. So there are 2 options for the subcommittee's consideration. A is to approve restoring the funding for external evaluation funded with a general fund appropriation of $165,000 in fiscal year 23, as recommended by the governor, in addition to the $100,000 provided for in the base budget. If the subcommittee chooses this option, the subcommittee may also wish to consider recommending that the full committee issue a letter of intent requiring the department to provide copies of the external evaluation reports conducted on state-funded programs on or before January 1st, 2023 to the Interim Finance Committee. Option B is not approve the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriation totaling $265,000 in fiscal year 23 for external evaluation, which includes $165,000 in decision unit E276 and $100,000 in the base budget. The department could explore funding the external evaluation utilizing federal grant funding, and fiscal staff requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
So committee members, there are two options before us. Questions or comments? Senator Kiefer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that as we sort of created and built out these categorical programs originally, the evaluation was a critical piece of us moving into the new funding formula based on the success that these programs demonstrated through these external evaluations. And I think that as we make this additional change, it's important for us to continue to prioritize that external evaluation. And I would suggest that we keep this funding in the budget so that we make it a priority going forward.
And thank you, Senator Kiefer. I was leaning in the same direction and also looking at the letter of intent to the full committee. I think if we don't evaluate it, we can't measure it, we can't monitor it, we can't figure out where we're going with it. So, other questions or comments from other committee members at this time? Not seeing any. Senator Dondero-Loop?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would move that we approve restoring the funding for external evaluations funded with a general fund appropriation of $165,000 in fiscal year 2023 as recommended by the governor, in addition to $100,000 provided for in the base budget. And I would also add to that the full committee issue a letter of intent requiring the department to provide copies of the external evaluation reports conducted on state-funded programs on or before January 1st, 2023 to the interim finance committees.
Have a motion from Senator Dondero-Loop, second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any, all those in, oops, I'm sorry, Assemblyman Levitt.
Just for clarification, Madam Chair, so if we do restore this funding using general fund appropriations, and are we able to still explore grant funding and potentially revert money back to the general fund if money is found or accrued?
Basically, here we are saying that we do want to fund this with general fund dollars. We don't want to take the chance that there might not be funding for it and that it might not get done. We want to guarantee that these evaluations happen and that we get a report so that we know what's going on. We don't want to leave it to chance.
Oh, yeah, I understand that part. I guess my question is, just because I'm new and sitting in the front row, does that mean that there's not going to be any exploration of federal grant funding at this point?
I don't believe there would be any grant funding involved in this particular conversation at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So with that, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on to item number 3, the Commission on Mentoring.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last major closing issue for this budget is the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $25,000 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for the Nevada Commission on Mentoring program. The program funding reductions approved through of the 31st special session. The department indicates the recommendation to restore the funding for the commission would allow compliance with the requirements of Chapter 385 of the Nevada Revised Statute, which established the Nevada Commission on Mentoring. And just for background information, the 2019 legislature, through passage of Assembly Bill 235, approved general fund appropriations of $25,000 in each year of the 2019-21 biennium to award certain grants of money to mentorship programs. And the department indicates that this recommendation would be used for the same purpose. During the budget hearing, the department indicated it plans to work with the commission to determine the allocation of the funds in each year of the upcoming biennium. Just the subcommittee wished to recommend approving the governor's recommendation to restore funding for the Nevada Commission on Mentoring funded with general fund appropriations of $25,000 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium, and provide fiscal staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
And Ms. Mangola, if you would do other closing items also so that we can do one motion, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. There are two other closing items for this budget, which appears reasonable to staff. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 and 2 be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments on these items? Not seeing any. Senator Dondero-Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I move that we approve this budget as stated by staff, including the other closing items 1 and 2, recommended by the governor, and allowing the staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
I have a motion from Senator Dondero-Loop, second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 45 is the literacy programs budget, which was heard by the subcommittee on March 3, 2021. There's only one major closing issue for this budget. The governor recommends total general fund appropriations of $1.3 million over the 2021-23 biennium to fund 3 existing positions and continue the administration of the Read by Grade 3 program, contingent upon the approval of the governor's recommendation to restore the funding for the Read by Grade 3 program in the other state education programs budget, and is recommended to transfer to the state education funding account. And staff would just note that the governor recommends funding for the Read by Grade 3 program be transferred to the new state education funding account to provide a base for pupil funding under the pupil-centered funding plan that may be used by school districts and charter schools for unrestricted purposes. And the information at the bottom of page 46 provide a history on how these positions were established, along with the duties and responsibilities of those 3 positions. During the budget hearing, the department indicated if the governor's recommendation to transfer the Read by Grade 3 program funding to the pupil-centered funding plan, if that was approved, the statutory requirements for literacy instruction would not change. The department further indicated that the 3 existing education programs professional positions would no longer be required to assist with monitoring and developing grant agreements associated with the allocation and reimbursements of the Read by Grade 3 grant funds. However, the additional time that will be reallocated to allow these positions to identify best practices and provide additional technical assistance and professional support to literacy strategists and educators across the state to ensure students continue to meet the literacy and English language arts goals established by the state. Just the subcommittee wished to recommend approving decision units E275 and E600 to continue the literacy program's budget, including 3 full-time positions, contingent upon approval of the governor's recommendation to restore the funding for the Read by Grade 3 program in the other state education programs account, and provide fiscal staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Are there questions on this component? Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my absent colleague, Senator Severs-Ganser, would just want me to comment on the importance of the Read by 3 program and the continued support of this budget. Thank you.
I will give you a gold star and report to her that you did well. And I think seeing this in front of us, that program, the Read by Grade 3, will not be called Read by Grade 3 anymore, but the work is still going to be done in the pupil-centered funding plan. And the fact that the proposal is to still keep those positions to make sure that we are supporting those literacy specialists gives me a little bit better level of comfort knowing that this program, even though it won't have a bright line around it, will still be integrated into the rest of the work that's going to be done for the students. So that gives me a little bit better level of comfort with that conversation. So with that, any other conversation on this item? Seeing none, Senator Dondero-Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move that we approve decision units E275 and E600 to continue the literacy program's budget as stated by staff.
I have a motion from Senator Don Loop, second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Moving on to the next account, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now begin presenting the following 5 department budgets, which the subcommittee has not previously reviewed, and for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations. I will pause following my presentation of each budget to allow for questions. When I have presented the last budget in this group and questions have been addressed, the chair may wish to ask for a single motion for closing considerations on all of the budgets for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing recommendation. So starting from page 49 is the account for alternative schools budget, which includes a 3-year federal charter school program grant, which expired on September 30th, 2018, with an extension to expend remaining funds through September 30, 2021. This budget also supports the licensure and regulation of private schools. There are no major closing issues for this budget, and there are no other closing items.
Questions from the committee?
I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we can move on to the next one, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next budget is the Standards and Instructional Support Budget. This budget supports the positions that coordinate the monitoring and technical support of school district and regional training program implementation of standards through the approval of textbooks and other instructional support measures, and the operational expenses of the Commission on Educational Technology. There are no major closing issue for this budget. There's only one other closing item which appears reasonable to staff, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this budget.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, we can move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 53 is the Career and Technical Education budget. This budget provides resources to improve occupational education programs and to provide improved access to these programs by populations with special needs, including individuals with disabilities, limited English proficiency, the economically disadvantaged, and non-traditional enrollees. There are no major closing issues for this budget. There are 2 other closing items. For other closing item number 2, staff requests technical adjustments to smooth or reflect general fund appropriations of $678,013 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium, based on the average general fund appropriations recommended by the governor, and is consistent with the actions of the 2019 legislature to provide consistent maintenance of effort each year. So staff would just recommend that technical adjustment.
Thank
And
you.
I'll be happy to answer any question.
Are there any questions from any of the committee on this particular item with that adjustment? I believe I interpret that as to making sure that we have the appropriate dollars in each year of the biennium to make sure that we keep our MOE in effect. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair. The general fund appropriations in this budget is a part of the maintenance of effort required. The remaining general fund appropriations required for the maintenance of effort will be included in the other state education programs budget.
Thank you very much.
And the technical adjustment is just to make it the same amount of general fund dollars in each year in this budget.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from any other committee members at this time? Seeing none, we can move on to the next item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 55 is the Gear Up budget. This budget is a federally funded program to provide low-achieving students who are economically disadvantaged with an opportunity to improve academic achievement, increase test scores, decrease the high school dropout rate, and increase enrollment in institutions of higher education and success rates at those institutions. There are no major closing issues for this budget. There's one other closing item which appears reasonable to staff, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions at this time? Not seeing any. We can move on to the next item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last or final budget is the continuing education budget. This budget funds classes for adults to improve basic literary skills, obtain knowledge and skills necessary for employment and self-sufficiency, assist in the completion of secondary education, and teach parents the educational skills necessary to become full partners in the education of their children. There are no major closing issues and no other closing items for this budget.
Are there any questions from any committee members on this particular item? Not seeing any. So with that, Ms. Mangola?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 59, as previously noted, fiscal staff is responsible for developing recommendations for the following budgets. To assist with the closing, fiscal staff has identified the budgets that are recommended to be closed as recommended by the governor, along with identified technical adjustments that are recommended below. Fiscal staff recommends that the following budgets be closed as recommended by the governor, with the technical adjustments noted, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. 101-2672, that's the Department Account for Alternative Schools budget. 101-2675, that's the Department Standards and Instructional Support budget. 101-2676, Career and Technical Education, including the technical adjustment to reflect maintenance of effort amount of $678,013 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium. 101-2678, the Gear Up budget. And lastly, 101-2680, the Continuing Education budget.
Thank you. Senator Dondero-Loop?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move that we close the aforementioned budgets as stated by staff.
A motion from Senator Dondero-Loop, a second from Assemblywoman Hodeggy. Any questions or comments on the motion? Staff, excellent job. We appreciate all of your hard work. So with that, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. And I believe that was our last item on our budgets for this morning. The other item that is left on our agenda for today is public comment. If I could have broadcast services queue up anyone on the phone for public comment, and I would invite public comment here in the room to come forward. Please introduce yourself for the record and keep the 2-minute time limit in the back of your mind, please. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. To say there are many moving parts related to the K-12 education budget would be a gross understatement. We know Nevada schools are chronically underfunded. According to the National Education Association's ranking of the states 2020, released just this month. We also know Nevada has a very diverse student population, including some of the highest percentages of students from low-income families as well as English learners. Meanwhile, this committee is grappling with the transition to a new school funding formula riddled with implementation issues, all during a global pandemic. As state general fund revenues have taken a hit, the governor's proposed some difficult cuts to K-12 in this budget, including $32 million to Senator Gansert's favorite early learning literacy supports, and $156 million to class size reduction, even though Nevada suffers from the largest class sizes in the country. He also has proposed a phase-in of the new funding formula, raising a host of new issues and confusion with the transition. One item of note from the COVID-19 funding item discussed this morning was a $20 million to create the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program. While Nevada's teacher pipeline merits work and attention, we believe much more needs to be done on the issue of teacher retention. Large class sizes, including difficult working conditions and a structural teacher wage gap, all fuel educator turnover. NSCA is concerned language buried in SB 543 from last session that walls off 16.6% of district ending fund balance from negotiations, while sweeping balances over that amount leaves no room for economic items to be bargained. This language will certainly lead to further erosion of educator pay and will limit other proposals originated by educators related to workplace safety and working conditions, fueling an even bigger exodus from the profession. Even the welcome news of over $1 billion of federal funds to support our education system further complicates budget deliberations, as these only serve as a temporary patch for Nevada's chronically underfunded schools. While these funds will serve as critical relief for our schools as we try to recover from this pandemic, they also create a serious fiscal cliff just a few years away. It is in this light that Majority Leader Benitez Thompson's concern about a Donors Choose project in her district rings true. When we don't adequately fund schools, educators have to dig deep to just cover basic needs like cleaning their own classroom. We hope this influx of federal funds is not used as an excuse to kick the can down the road on our funding shortfall. Instead, these funds should help us envision what public education in Nevada can be and act now to make that a reality into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment? Broadcast services?
If you would like to make public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 927, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Committee Chairwoman Carlton and Darrell Loop. My name is Hava Ahmed, Hawah, AHMAD, and I'm here representing the Clark County Education Association. CCEA would like to voice our concern for deductions in the budget. We appreciate the intent of the Governor's Office and NDE, but without a designated revenue stream, the proposed budget deductions will negatively impact our students and stress local funds. For instance, much of the COVID-19 ESSER funds will be utilized to create short-term programs targeted at a small population of students that will require a significant investment from school districts to upkeep or continue the programs to see any anticipated progress. Instead of talking about budget deductions and in many ways putting our students last, we need to give our students every opportunity to succeed. As such, you must designate a funding source for SB 543 to fund the people-centered funding plan optimally. In this session, you can make a difference and should fully fund Nevada's K-12 education system. The 2019 Nevada Legislature passed SB 543 last session with the intention to fund the people-centered funding plan in the 2021 legislative session. It is now over halfway through the 2021 session, and this legislature has not proposed any new funding for SB 543. The historical underfunding of Nevada's public school system has resulted in academic achievement ratings at the bottom of our nation. By failing to fund SB 543, we're telling families and students throughout Nevada that last place is good enough. CCEA understands that it takes both the Democrats and Republicans, led by the governor, to pass new revenue. Our students who have already lost a year of their education to the pandemic cannot afford to wait for another legislative session to pass new revenue. The time for change is now. If this legislature continues to choose to not pass a designated revenue stream, Nevada voters will decide in 2022. The bottom line is that we appreciate all of the intent and all of the work that has gone into these budgets, but we cannot talk about deductions right now when we really do need to fund our education system. Thank you.
Any other callers, broadcast services?
If you would like to make public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 653, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. Could you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair Carlton. My name is Dora Lee Martinez. I represent the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. We are members of 50 and growing. Some of our members are blind parents with children who are not disabled and go to the Washoe County School District. I'm here today because I don't know where to go, really. Joan Ebert and the Washoe County School District remember me from going to McQueen and cheering up doing a public comment because I have a member of my coalition who is the blind parent of a very smart daughter, and she has underlying issues, so she can't let her daughter go to school in person, first grade, and she's been fighting and trying to get assistance with the Roberts School, elementary school here in Sparks. And her concerns and her emails and voicemail have gone unanswered. So I went to the website, tried to find a grievance form, none to be found. So I urge whoever's there from the NDE or the district to please reach out and help us. We do not want our children, our students, to be subject of a failed education because the website is not compliant with ADA. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Broadcast Services, are there any other callers?
Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no more callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcast Services. So with that, committee members, our task for this morning has been completed. Thank you all very much. Have a good day. Members of Ways and Means, I'll see you this evening at 6 o'clock for Ways and Means at dusk. There you go. Thank you.